candidates?
I got a question for both congressional candidates. I agree completely with what you said, Martha, about a balanced budget amendment, but I also believe that all of us would probably agree that we'd rather have a $500 billion federal budget that's out of balance versus a $3 trillion budget that's in balance, because it all gets down to, cutting spending. So the question for both of you is, is there one federal department or agency that you would just get rid of entirely? Because a lot of Republicans talk about cutting spending, but then there's crickets chirping when you get down to details, because nobody wants to, make those cuts. It's tough, because that means somebody's going to lose their grant or their loan or whatever. So what do you, specifically, do you have any plans for cutting a particular department or departments?
Go ahead. Well, first of all, I just want to say that it's been my experience on the City Council, particularly in 2009, where I was happy to support a budget with, when we started out, we had $0 in the rainy day fund because our now congressman had used that money to continue to spend and spend and spend. Okay, so we started with a zero balance in our rainy day fund, and we had to obviously cut back in light of the economy. I was happy to support a budget that we reduced spending by $9 million. We made government smaller by $9 million, and we put $3 million away in the city's reserve fund, and we did it all without raising one single tax. That right there is a perfect example of how you can make government smaller. You can reduce spending. You can cut and root out waste. Now, did it make some people unhappy? Absolutely. Was my phone ringing from folks that were looking for where their money was coming from the city of Montgomery's government? Absolutely. And it took strong leadership to stand up and say, our number one goal at the city of Montgomery as a municipal government is to make sure that we provide its citizens with a clean, safe environment in which to live. And that has to be our priority. And under the federal government, our priority and our roadmap is the U.S. Constitution. So we absolutely have to go back to that document and ask ourselves whether or not this spending is constitutional. And I think we can root out waste. I mean, you want an example. An example would be the U.S. Department of Education. We absolutely need to, the U.S. Department of Education, all they are doing right now is handing down unfunded mandates to our local governments who are sitting in the best position to make decisions about our children's education, not bureaucrats up in Washington. We have two entitlement programs, Social Security and Medicare, and I would submit to you that they absolutely should have to submit budgets to Congress and be held accountable to those budgets as it relates to their spending. That's not happening right now. Our Department of Defense is discretionary, yet we have these entitlement programs that are refunded year after year with no accountability and transparency. So can it be done all at one time? No, but I submit to you that there absolutely are ways to root out waste in our government. We all know it's there, and it takes strong political will to do so. Thank you.
So the way I would address it is that first and foremost, you always have if you had a free pass to go in Congress, whatever you want to do, what would you wipe out first, right? And Department of Education, I agree. We've had that question asked before. Is absolutely one of the many departments that I think are there. I would add to the list the IRS. I would repeal the 16th Amendment as well as the 17th Amendment. 17th Amendment to build the budget, but you get Department of Energy. I mean, you got all of them that are up there. A lot of these departments that we have are not enumerated powers in the Constitution. Should be addressed. Then you have the realistic side. You're going to get up there. You're going to try to shrink size of government. How are you going to effectively make that plan? In business, there's a couple of ways you do things. One, first and foremost, you always start your budgeting process with the estimated earnings that you made the year before, if not an average of the 5 years before. When you start getting back to that, today we seem to budget in Congress based on projections. And that's a bad way to do it, because when your projections fall short, what are you stuck with? Huge deficits that now you got to make up. So first and foremost, you start your budgeting process from previous year's expected revenue sources, and then you start from a zero budgeting process. Okay, you starting with, what do we have to have? We do have to have national defense. We do have to have roads paved, things like that. And you start from that. What are the pillars in our society that must be there? And then start cutting behind that and start making some real decisions and be effective in doing it. The other thing you can do that we really need to do is we need to bring in the federal payroll system across the board, all the benefits, all the retirements, everything across the board, and bring it much closer to what it is in the private sector. Today we have an out-of-control government that is doing way too much to entice people to come get on the government dole, and it's penalizing the private sector. We need to bring it back in line with doing that, and you don't have to do that day one, because today, I guarantee, if you start comparing jobs, apples to apples, you're going to find that there's sometimes 25 to 30% difference in what that same position makes in the private sector when you take a complete compensation package. That's the key. They may say, oh, well, he makes a little less than he does comparably in his salary. Yeah, if you can retire sooner. You don't got to pay near as much in. He's getting exponentially more out of it by doing it. Those are some realistic free market principles we need to bring to government, start making those things happen. And then once you do it, you start putting them in place chunk by chunk. I don't know any department that can't start making 5% cuts for the next 5 years, which would bring down our overall budget by 25%. Those are the kind of discussions that need to be had. Those are the kind of discussions that I would stand tall in as your congressman. Thank you.
Yes, I have a question for both of them again. What specifically would you do about Don't Ask, Don't Tell? And if you oppose it, what would you do to oppose it? And if you're in favor of it, why would you be in favor of repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell to allow gays to serve openly in the military?
From day one, I have had a very strong stance against Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Opening up openly homosexual activity in the military is going to do nothing but weaken our military fighting forces. The UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, is very, very specific. And even if you eliminate Don't Ask, Don't Tell, you do not eliminate the penalty for having homosexual behavior in the military. So only thing you're doing by repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Let's forget about the moral debate of homosexuality. Let's forget about what's inappropriate. Let's talk about how it's going to affect our military and affect those individuals that may want to decide to serve in that manner in our warfighting forces. You eliminate Don't Ask, Don't Tell. You eliminate a protection layer that's there for them today. When you serve in the military, folks, it is a voluntary action. We have a voluntary military. You sign up because you want to be a part of the warfighting abilities this country offers. Okay, and when you do that, you give up a lot of civil liberties. Okay, there's a whole other set of rules you live by. But before you sign on the dotted lines, you make a choice. You make a choice to say, it means so much to me to serve my country, I'm willing to make these sacrifices. And if you're not willing to make those sacrifices, you don't sign on the dotted line. Point blank. This is not a discussion about rights. And first and clear, this is not a discussion about rights. Our military is not a place for social experimentation. It's not a place for political grandstanding. And I'll stand tall with my commandant, who's been the only major general to stand up and say, Mr. President, this is wrong. You show me one valid reason why repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell will improve our warfighting ability, I will support it. And that's what the question has to be, and that's what the answer needs to be based upon. If there's risk that it's not going to improve it and that it might diminish it, we absolutely don't need to do it. We are the #1 warfighting capability in this world. And we have stayed that way because of our strict code of conduct and the military front and the regiment that we create in that environment, and we cannot let it go. Thank you.
Yeah, to answer your question, I too absolutely do not support repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and I will tell you that just like was previously stated, we are fighting wars in this country right now. It is absolutely not the time to create any uncertainty for our troops. We absolutely must give them the tools that they need in order to go out there and protect our country and our freedom and our liberty. And calling into question based on someone's liberal agenda, the repeal of that, I think, is absolutely wrong. So.
This is for Rebecca. I have a friend that's an educator.